do have to do some things really quick before I get into this, and I will try to move through it quick. There is a lot of content. I realize we're starting a little bit past the time, but I do have to thank Chris Page, Danielle Shelby, and Jenna and Amy DeGroot. Is Amy here? I don't know if she was able to come to this. For all the work on the show. I'd like to thank friends and colleagues from UT Martin for their support. A huge thank you to our students who traveled here for this talk. I also have to thank the Faculty of Research and Development Grant Program at UTM for supporting my grant for this exhibition and the production of the work that will be traveling after this show already to 5 other exhibitions. So, one of the things that I like to do now before I start a body of work is kind of do like a little movie insert. And this is kind of a mindset note thing that I kind of make because I tend to think of these as more like a cinematic kind of group of images that are juxtaposition that work singularly on their own, but also work together as a thing. So, if you'll bear with me, imagine a room. Stop. Imagine a room. Put in all the things that make a strange place scary. Imagine incorrectly choosing to go up the stairs. Imagine hallways and corridors just out of sight, not knowing what's around the corner. Stop. You don't know what's in here. I'm not sure where here is. You don't know this room, this place. Why are you here and who are you looking for? You are here. You're the one making it. It's Hitchcock. It's Kubrick. It's your house. That's your corner. That's your hallway. That's the view from the floor you've drawn since you were 7. Look down the hall. There's a crack in the door. I can see in there. It's the past. It's a place from time. It's somewhere else. Far away. A vacation maybe. A storm. You're washed up. You're older now. You're jettisoned on this place. Like Castaway, like Lord of the Flies, but with no Piggy, no one else. Ride a wave. Remember drowning, it's how you learn to swim. Watch the floods come in. It's bigger than you. It's at the window. It's at the door. Stop. You're in a room. You're with you, but you're not here. Places, things. You like things. These things are them. You think of them with these things. Tools, vices, cards, chance. These are old things. These are your things. These are things you know. Arrange them over time. Let them stack up, cover over, accumulate. You like things. Say what you will with them. Consume more. What's closer to death makes you feel alive. Consumption comes from fear. Make us scared when we consume more. Take a look around. Stop. You're in a room. Make them with you, put them there. And here, look around. Over there, just a reminder, you're a passenger. Like Iggy, they come with us. I go to them in this place. I am in. I am making. I am not in this room, the one I am making. But everything about me, my mind, my memories, my sadnesses are here. Look up the stairs now, count the light bulbs. Look at the shadows. There's a painting on the wall. It's about the now. It's about the room you're in now. It's about the things you think about. You step out again. Imagine a room, once scary, now empty. Feel it again. You're alone with everyone. Stop. This is a preface to getting you into the mindset of how I went about making the work for this show. I often think about the song In My Room by Beach Boys from the Surfer Girl album of 1963. It's supposed to be a song about a guy finding confidence in his room alone with the things that he likes, sharing secrets with himself. But I often felt like for me that this is really close to the painting space or the space that I am when I create work. One of the notions that I'm going to deal with today when I'm talking about the body of work that's in the show is the idea of temporality. I'm going to read through this so we understand what it is. Because I understand it's not a term that we always talk about. This is really about the way in which we experience time. In our life, the most important memories are slowed down and internalized, made larger. They command more resonance. Part of what I'm referencing in the work is how certain moments and people can escape their lineal place in time, coexisting with present narratives, and that the artist is addressing. Now, escaping their lineal place in time means that they're outside of a linear time, which means one thing after the next. Often when I'm making work, I'm trying to be present in a singular thing, but often many other things kind of pop up when I'm creating. And I really tried in this body of work to openly accept those things. The complication in doing that pictorially is that they are out of time and out of place with the sequential narrative, and so it makes it difficult to get to the image. Our tendency as creatives Now, part of what this deals with too, as I'm going to get into, is death and loss, and I'm sure that everybody in this room has experienced this on some level. Heidegger believed that death in his presence gives new meaning to our internal sense of choice, how we choose things, the decisions that we make. But out of death comes despair. Kierkegaard believed that despair is an element of the spirit, a part of the internal in the person. Despair is the failure of the existence of self. So when we lose people, we lose part of ourself. And it is that lack of confidence in the existence in others that we keep in our life that makes us feel unfamiliar with the parts of ourselves that are still left. There are two thoughts in this, that the foundation of ourself and how we construct it gets heightened after loss, and also despair is realized through loss, and temporarily our construct of self starts to erode. Now, one of the losses that I'll address in this talk was probably one of the greatest teachers that I ever had the experience of working with was Dr. Frances Colvin. Fran was a minimalist painter and scholar, and she was at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where I went to grad school. And she was the chair of the department at the time, and I was there for right around 2002 to the end of 4. She was a minimalist critic and had her PhD from Southern California. You can read her other academic credentials there, and she always had the same, do you really believe that? Fran's classes were like sitting in an ocean of intellectualism. I mean, she could reference philosophers that you never heard of by talking about a Thomas Kincaid painting and how it connected to what you were doing in your work. And she moved very quickly and freely through this. And even though as a painter and as an artist, I'm not someone that really responds to minimalism so much, I did respond to how full and amazing that her mind was. Every time that we had a class, which was usually 2 days a week, we got amped up for it like somebody would a pay-per-view movie or any kind of other thing that they're really excited about. And she just could continuously do this in every class period. Two of her books, and I'm talking about Fran, that you can reference if you're interested in minimal art, critical perspective, and abstract art in the 20th century. One of the connections of somebody that we lost before Fran was the critic David Hickey. And as I was doing research on trying to find some of Fran's last interviews where she was speaking and writing about things, I came upon this thing about David Hickey where he was talking about artists should make orphans, like little orphan Annie, who go off in the world and find their daddy Warbucks. And this was Fran and Dave were actually friends. They did a lot of criticism together. But this sentence kind of stuck with me because one of the things that I always thought about Fran is that she was very striking. She had this really neat red hair, and she almost looked like, to me, little orphan Annie all grown up. But the whole idea of Annie herself was pretty cool because Annie went on adventures, and she saw crimes, and she explored things. And, she came from more of an impoverished background and went into this kind of like wealthier society and kind of did her adventures. And I thought about how that must be like for Fran, working with the art world and the people that were in it. The role of the critic in the art world, and I want to talk a little bit about Fran, the person versus professional, is to analyze, interpret, and evaluate. They're the mediator between the artist and the public. And this includes written text in magazines, journals, and things like that online. And Wiseman's essay, The Psychology of the Critic, the step from connoisseur to critic implies the progression from knowledge to judgment. And that criticism is the knowledge to make judgment. So a critic is someone who makes their judgment and advances things into the light of the public. Leading to the question, do we critique as we create, or the things we make are personal curation of our own life, and are we conscious as we do it? Which is something that I'm trying to struggle with or deal with every time that I'm making a new body of work. Where is my consciousness lie? Where is my presence with what I'm actually making? And can I tune my presence more as I'm making work, but also am I self-critical when I'm making it for it to be true with what I'm actually trying to do or talk about? Now, in this too, as I was studying a lot of this different stuff, I started doing a lot of still life paintings, and I started returning back to still life paintings when we went to COVID for the lockdown. This is going to kind of work up to the work that's in the show, because there's some of these in there too. This is Latin for Remember You Must Die, and it's popular, and a lot of you guys have had our history classes know a lot of this, but I'll go through it. And what it presents the viewer with is the death paradox. To really love life, you have to appreciate death, that this truth is meant to be inspirational, that our time here is very short, and thus we must maximize it. And the vanitas, which is Latin for vanity, or refers to the shallowness of material possessions. So appropriating where we give importance with the part of the truth that is meant to be inspirational and saved. We have to appreciate life while it's here is fleeting and do not get caught up in too many material things. And do things in our life are our narrative. How do these things define us? So one of the things that I started to do as I was drawing and creating these still lifes was to think about objects in their place, and then that I know that I'm making something that is connected to history, but how can I modernize it in the time that was going on? And I'm just going to speak very frankly about what was going on in the world at the time, and I will take no stance in discussing it, but I will talk about what I was watching. We were in the COVID lockdown right around the time of the impeachment trials, and I was in a room a lot. So it's not uncommon that I was addressing a lot of geometry, but also, too, a little bit of the cubist imagery that started to happen around the early 1900s, because it felt like I had looked at the rooms and the hallways in my house so many times that my life had become a cubist painting. I guess there were worse things going on, and there were certainly then, but I know that a lot of time was spent designing compositions and sitting in and thinking about rooms. So, the first painting here that I have is taking scenes from the plaza. This is a 30 by 30 painting, and this was actually using an interior from a picture of a Trump Plaza room that was left in New Jersey that was supposed to be part of a chain that went to the casino that was never built. On the table, you see an orange that is an unpeeling little unraveling. Of course, you can make those connections there. But the unraveling orange was also a sign of the Benitez painters of a type of like style and excellence that if you could pull off an orange peel or a lemon peel specifically unraveling, that you had some sort of facility. So what I'm doing is creating the presence but having a complete dialogue with the past. You'll see in the second one, everything in its right place is usually all the things that I had laying around. I had my morning coffee, I had a bowl of oranges, which also referred to like the nickname for Trump is always Big Orange, and then also two words to the sea, so go Big Orange. So a lot of the things that, were we going to have college football again? A lot of this stuff kind of like literally made it into the imagery of the painting. My fountain drink is a 44-ounce Diet Coke that I get from Casey's, but you'll see in this it's 45 because Trump is 45. Instead of writing out ounce, I wrote OZ because OZ sounds like Oz. And for me, Trump is very similar to the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to what is behind the big red curtain. And if you look behind the still life, there's the big red curtain. So I will show some other ones, and these are a little bit more refracted. And most of these are actually designed and have places in my house, like our shutters outside, which are actually red instead of blue, but blue with painting, and tables that I was trying to construct collapsing. And it felt like, when we were watching things on the news, that the fabric of everything that I knew true to be, true as a kid, our country, the things that I thought were stable, as they were collapsing and falling apart, I thought about that if I was going to use a table to put objects on, that it had to be kind of collapsing on the whole, its own weight of everything that was going on. And then sometimes it would reward itself to do. So these are two paintings, Still Life, Lockdown, Glaring May, and Dawning, which means the next day. You have to get it the next day in the morning, so we kind of reset the painting and didn't collapse as much. Now, as I started to go through the still lifes, one of the things that I started thinking about were the rooms that were in the background to support. So the still life kind of holds a frame, and then there were rooms. But I started asking a question, too. How many times am I generically going to just use rooms? Specifically starting to use places that are in the hallways of my house. And I started to think about rooms and then empty rooms because I really wasn't thinking about people. And then I got really nervous because I thought, oh no, I'm going to end up making an Edward Hopper painting. When I was in undergraduate and graduate school, the last thing that I ever wanted to do was make an Edward Hopper painting. Edward Hopper paintings felt really old, they felt really stiff, and they felt like they belonged at a certain time and place, and I was nervous about doing that. But I was noticing I was thinking more about Hopper stuff, so I started to read and do some research. And Hopper actually had some great quotes that were really adjacent with what I was going through at the time. And I'll skip through and read the first two, but I like the last two a lot. When I don't feel in the mood for painting, I go to the movies once a week more. I go on a regular movie binge. And partly what I do now is I just watch movies all the time in the background when I paint. I usually will put it on Netflix or something else, and I will play movies. And what this does is it creates another catalyst of things that I can actually respond to. But the most important quote, which is one that's really true to this show, is when asked in an interview what Hopper was looking for when he was painting all these rooms and places across the country, Hopper responded with, me. I'm looking for myself. about what I was doing a lot and actually made me connect to Hopper because of their absence of anything in them, which is Sun in an Empty Room from 1963 and Rooms by the Sea from 1951. And it is amazing that every time I thought about a Hopper painting, I instantly thought about a Hitchcock movie, right? These are stills from Notorious and Psycho. And there's always this great foreboding that happens in a Hitchcock movie, especially when it's in a great old house that kind of seems like a Hopper. There's a stairwell, it's spooky, there's paintings and images, there's allusions to other places in the house that you can't quite see yet, which is all what I was thinking and feeling when I was kind of locked up and trying to move through these spaces. This is actually a connection that I didn't know that I found in my research, that House by the Railroad from Edward Hopper in 1925 is actually the theme that inspired the Bates House from Psycho. Now, I talked about Fran earlier, and I talked about finding a middle road, and one of the artists that Fran gave me, which was somebody I didn't know about, was this artist, John Wesley. And this was kind of our perfect middle. John Wesley was born in 1928 and also died the same year Fran did. So I also lost one of my best teachers, and I lost one of my favorite painters at the same time. And it was ironic because Fran had given me John Wesley. He was known for like a comic style part of work. He appropriated a lot of 40s, 50s, and 60s comic book characters and recontextualized them to do funny things and sometimes very naughty things. I'm not show you those, but you can explore his work. But because they were very minimal and flat, and he often used only like 4 or 5 colors, it was something that Fran and other minimalists responded to. He was really, really good friends with Donald Judd. And it was something that I could fall into because he was in fact a picture maker, which I consider myself to be. Now these are some John Wesley paintings, and like I said, they're very funny, and you'll notice the limitations of the color, and primarily to the flatness. There's no glitter in these, they're not trying to be illusionistic. This is Picasso across the South of France from 1974. Bumstead out the window, which is kind of funny because he's taking a Bumstead comic panel where he's like doing something and he's putting him out the window, which looks like a very precarious situation, but he was very happy. And then just a series of stairs, which I saw and I instantly loved because of the flatness of it and the simplicity of the design and color. And there's 2 paintings when I was looking through here and I was doing this body of work that I've thought about a lot over the years, that I continue to think about both when John Wesley and Fran passed. One is the painting, The Night Titanic from 1984, and one is Bumstead's Foot, which is a Coco canvas from 1991. The Night Titanic, of course, because it was connected to an American history symbol, the movie Titanic. Of course, we've learned the story of the Titanic since we were kids. But for me, it's almost a perfect picture. It's a balance of recognizable imagery that we can see, or waves that are very gray and similar to nighttime, with the front of the bow of the ship that is completely black with no rendering, with, right in this picture, 5 pink portholes where there's still life still. Now, part of what makes the Night Titanic so great is we know the inevitability of what happens to the ship. The Bumstead's Foot painting is really neat because there's just this foot coming down, and I was never able to tell, was this a napkin? Was this a handkerchief, which is what I was believe, and then it's just sitting on this 2-foot ground, kind of like a Rothko painting. Now, in some of the formal conceptual constructs I'm looking here, I want to talk about how this led me to kind of starting to examine all this to get into the work that's in the show. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to construct interiors that could hold multiple states and multiple narratives. And I talked about getting out of lineal time into non-lineal time, using natural elements in the room to passively address layered and non-connected narrative, which means often enough when I'm experiencing something, I'm thinking about 2 or 3 different things at the same time. So I'm trying to get in a true state of what is it like to have an idea when you're making a work of art, when you're thinking about all these other things at the same time, and can all this happen simultaneously together? How do I recontextualize sample images to construct narrative that hold dual context? I want to use things that have multiple meanings. How do I put multiple objects and their meaning from mundane to symbolic, and how does that change the effect of the narrative, the story? And then also, too, how can I hybridize selected historical still-life types and represent personal formal aesthetics while addressing modern and biographical narrative? That's a lot of art speak. It just means, how can I play off of what we know historically about a lot of these paintings, put myself in it, change the objects that I'm using to hold personal narrative while hiding under the facade or the front of what the still-life construct is, and make it more about my life that's happening. So, some of the things that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at this and what I like about John Wesley is like the idea of flatness, pop culture, shape abstraction, and beauty. And left here I have the painting 5, which is a John Wesley painting, and it's next to Little Orphan Annie comic book. I talked earlier that I always thought that Freya reminded me a lot of what Annie would be like all grown up, her place in the world. But also, too, I love John Wesley so much as an artist, and I love his paintings. One of the things I always wanted to do, or wanted John Wesley to do, was to use Annie as a character in his paintings, because he used Popeye, he used people from Blondie, he used other Disney characters, and I just thought Annie would be the perfect thing, but he just passed before he ever used it. Because in my mind, I always wanted to connect those two things, so I just thought, I'll connect those two things. And one of the things that I like about how Little Orphan Annie book, if you're not familiar with the Little Orphan Annie cartoon or comic books, is that she's drawn with like no pupils in her eyes, which at the time as a kid I always thought that was very strange, kind of abstract, and the hair always looked like, depending on some artist, it looked like she was kind of on fire, which is very fascinating to me because it made her look like a superhero. And later on, when I kind of got into middle school and I started reading X-Men, you notice that like when Storm or some of the other X-Men would use their powers, that their eyes would go completely wide and white, and that is when the power is being executed. So that I always thought, well, that must mean that Annie was an X-Men. She was not, but in my mind, that's how I connected these things. There are some other comparisons and coincidences too that I found were really neat in doing this research. John Wesley was a very funny painter. Like his paintings are very funny, and he hides all sorts of little codes in his paintings, kind of like I like to do it, still like that I talked about earlier with the whole Wizard of Oz thing. And then when I was researching that Titanic as it went down, everybody's familiar with the story of the musical players that were playing and they went down with the ship. And I found that one of the players that was the cellist from there, his name was John Wesley Woodard. I don't think this is a fact that would have escaped John Wesley. He would have thought that this was kind of funny and he had a weird kind of sense of humor. But it also struck me too when I thought more about the Titanic, is I thought about one of the final scenes in the movie Basquiat, when a very heroin-ridden Jean-Michel Basquiat was walking down the street in his death, and he had 2 wooden clawed slippers on, and on the back he wrote the words Titanic, which again talks about the inevitability of the crash, which he soon passed afterwards. So, some of the narratives that I'm looking to explore in the body of work deal with this idea of reflection, location, absence, which is a state of being away from a person, and predication, which means subsuming one term under another. I'm saying one thing, but I'm actually weighing something else right underneath it. And when you declare something that's self-evident, one truth exists on the basis of the truth of another thing. So if we're creating a setup in one picture to say one thing, you have to believe in one truth to get to the next truth. And depending on how you walk into the painting, that can get very tricky or precarious. So here, one of the paintings is in the show. There's some paintings that are not in the show, but it just makes sense to show them. This is this idea of the painting First Glass, Second Glass, which is oil on canvas from 2023. In this, I have a room that is very elegant, with a nice kind of sectional house. My wife is always telling me that we're ready to go move into a new house. And the idea frightens me because the house that we live in now is the house that I grew up in. And I'm connected to several memories there. And one of the things that I'm scared of is when we leave that house, I will lose the memories that are connected to those people. But I have at least tried to look at houses. And in looking at a lot of houses, you look at a lot of rooms. And by doing this, I start to remember a lot about architecture and rooms. So I actually like painting and building these rooms more than I like the idea of moving to another house right now. So I have constructed this room where there's a painting of a scene of Little Orphan Annie looking in a window with her dog, and they're looking. And across the wall is a John Wesley painting that she's actually looking at. So the idea of a critic looking at there, but actually that there's no one in this room at all. There are 2 paintings, and the paintings represent the idea of me thinking about and mourning an art world where they're not here anymore. The second painting there at Aces Full is the same kind of thing. I have a table that's semi-collapsing, but it's keeping together. There's a bust that's supposed to look like a bust of me wrinkled, because I'm very aware of my wrinkles as I get older. And there's a little Annie kind of painting off to the left window there that's smiling. It's like, hey, you're okay. And then there's a little John Wesley painting at the door. Now, these 2 paintings right here are ones that I really like to deal with the whole idea of the stairwell and the room. And stairwells are great because they can mean, in a physical sense, ascendancy, like in a horror movie, to the unknown, but also, too, in a spiritual sense. I don't want to do the whole corny, Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven kind of thing, but as that idea of ascension, that we move on, that when people aren't present anymore, they die or they pass, that this is not the last thing, that they go to another place. And so that in this painting, Fran leading, John grieving, I used the 2 paintings that I showed earlier, and I'm going to get into that with the idea of the stairwell, but in this painting, the napkin or the handkerchief is fallen out of the painting and into the physical space, which makes itself available to the viewer to grab. And the reason why I have the broom there, and you'll see this in a couple other paintings, is the fact that I have room houses. Whenever you clean out a house and somebody moves out, the last thing you do before somebody moves back in is you sweep. And so it's an idea that time is undefeated, right? And so that it doesn't matter how important these people were to me, it's the fact that they're gone, memory lasts, and it means something, but also, too, we move to a different place. And this is another painting like that. On the left, you actually see the not Titanic painting, which I'm obsessed with, which is on the left wall there. But you notice it has one pink porthole, not five, as I was thinking of Wesley in his last years and his last life that was left, with an image of Annie there at the top of the stairwell. And so you can see like how we recontextualize these images, how I took the Wesley painting, used half of it, I just pulled the handkerchief out and put it into the physical space to make it available to the viewer. I do a lot of light bulbs too. There's this great Chuck Palahniuk quote. He's actually the guy who wrote Fight Club, if you know the author. And Chuck has this great quote in his books, and he says, you think maybe if you just work harder and faster, you can hold off the chaos, but then one day you're changing a patio light bulb with a 5-year lifespan, and you realize that you'll only be changing this light bulb maybe 10 more times before you'll be dead. And so part of the notion when I use the light bulb on is that there's life in this place, but also too, it's a measure of time. Now, the plurality of this is how like we experience multiple things at once, and like how all the influence of all this stuff comes together. So this has to do a lot with the idea of like play, personal loss, and in memoriam. And a lot of my paintings, I put little talismans that make me think about people that are no longer here, or the things that are very present. And the painting Grayson's Cabinet and the stairwell to the left, I had this very scary stairwell, but the day I was finishing trying to decide what I was going to actually put in the painting up to the left, I had actually stepped on this army man that I bought for my son Grayson and about crippled myself. As if you've ever stepped on one of those, they're right up there with Legos and the things that can injure you the most. So that is the thing that I put in the painting that day. So he's actually back there reading something. He's probably not paying attention at all. The other painting on the right is Ruby's Tiffany, the oil on canvas, which this is actually the corner part of the room in our house in the entertainment center. And up there is this kind of like faux Tiffany lamp that's in the background that was actually given to us by Miss Ruby, who was Amanda's grandmother, who was like a grandmother to me, especially after my mom passed. And I think every person in the South has one of these lamps, right? If you don't have a Tiffany or fake Tiffany lamp in your house, I would not call you Southern. I'm going to pull your Southern card right there. So this is in here, but it's also by a candle, right? Because we think about lighting a candle. So we also have a candle there in case our power goes out, which it does all the time in the country. So it's kind of a practical, visual thing, but also, too, the idea of like time. It's a very slippery thing, and that this is the light that kind of refers back to that. And if you go back in the left corner, you can see the light bulb and a door opens to the back, and that's actually a picture of our bedroom. And these are two other still lifes that kind of go through and give us some of the stuff that I was talking about earlier. And this is another one where I'm just kind of mixing up the genres and the objects to construct figurative narratives without using the figure kind of. So I'm trying to get this idea of the human condition without using people, right? People would seem like the most obvious answer to make something about the human condition, right? You use figures, you're doing something. But if you use figures, usually they don't exist in this idea of like linear time and space. And I'm not doing that, right? I'm kind of like bouncing around different time periods, different memories, and I'm trying to get them both in the same space together. And so here's another one. The rewards which are accorded to them. And if anybody knows your art history, this is a reference to a Chardin painting. So you can actually go to this painting and you can see some of the things that I've used. And a lot of these things are like things that I use in modern, like art materials. Why are art materials really great subjects for paintings? I have them in every room in my house, right? How many of you guys in here are artists? Raise your hand real quick if you're an artist. Do you have art supplies in every room in your house? Even the bathroom? There's still hands up. Okay, you're an artist. Good, we established that. All right. So they're also great directional tools, right? Most of your brushes and pencils and things, they have a duality. They do two things. But also, too, in a way in which you're trying to balance design, they push and pull you through space rather easily. Now, this is a painting, too, that deals with that idea of absence that I talked about earlier. And this was like, I used part of two houses that I was actually looking at while my wife had me looking for houses. And one of the things that I really loved is one time I was working with my stepfather, who was a contractor, and heavily smoked inside. And there was this perfect, beautiful little stain that was on the wall where the nicotine had done something in the wall, and the actual wall color was coming there, and it vibrated with this really beautiful feathered edge, and it looked just like a Rothko painting. I was like, man, he goes, these were heavy smokers in this house. And I was like, man, these smokers made a Rothko painting on the wall. And I got super excited. No one else was excited about it at all, and I thought it was pretty great. So I thought about like having a room like this with the interplay of light, so that the painting could have been there through something like that, or maybe the painting was stolen, or the people that were there had left. And what we're left with is the absence of something that was once there, which hopefully makes it become present, because that's what this is all about. Now, we talked about temporality earlier, and I just want to touch on it again as we go through this, because part of what I'm referencing inside the work is that certain moments and people can escape the millennial time place and coexist with the things we're doing in present again. Now, in this, here's a painting where like I have the idea of like riding a wave. I'm going to get into some like the beach step and the wave imagery that's kind of there. And I often thought about, as a critic, that sometimes Fran would have to carry this history of all these images in her head as she kind of moved around. And that, right, the world is a rocky kind of world, and like the waves just seem to work a little bit better, and that when you're really at your game, you're riding the crest of a wave, but also, too, that can be a very dangerous situation. And so, some of the iconography that you're going to see here, I'm going to talk a little bit how they do it. I'm going to try to move through this because I know we're going to go quick, but that waves have several meanings to me, and sometimes I use them to represent the sublime, like Turner did. Sometimes I use them as a metaphor for success and achievements and riding the wave. But also the anxiety or like stress, and eventually the waves crash and recede, representing the fear of failure. And the doors are gateways and passages, and you can read the rest of that, but I was always taken by the William Blake quote that at the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite, for man has closed himself up till he sees all things through the narrow chinks of his cavern. So what we're trying to do is move through and see all the possibilities. The beach or shore, I'm not a beach person, but it's weird that I like beach iconography so much. I have a hard time, my wife loves the beach. I usually see going to the beach as you pay money to sit in dirt, so I have a hard time kind of getting used to the idea of like sitting on the beach. Plus, I'm very pale and I burn very easy, so I'm not a beach person, but I love it as a symbol. Especially the Great Divide, because beaches are very like dreamlike and transitory. And the Titanic too, which I use a lot, it's not just a reference to the Wesley painting, but it used to be a symbol of progress and power when it was first created, but then death and failure, and also class divide. In my family history, my grandfather actually came from Malta and came through Ellis Island as an immigrant, so I was always very, very interested in the class divide part of the Titanic's nature. In my painting, the ship not only carries its own recognizable history, but also it acts as a vessel to carry loss, death, and doubt for me personally. Every time I look at that painting, and you'll probably find that you do this with your favorite works, if you look at a painting right now when you're, say, 18 or 22, and you look at it from 10 years from now, that painting, if it truly means something to you, you will experience it completely different. And here's the thing, the painting hasn't changed at all. You've changed. You've experienced other stuff. So, if we get into these paintings here, waves and navigating the personal and sublime, this is Deleuze's journey. So, I wanted to have the idea of a ship that were filled with little unpainted paintings, because I used to joke with Fran that the most minimalist painting ever would be if somebody just posted a canvas, which somebody's probably done by now. But also, too, I thought about, I didn't want to also see the idea of like rain and panic in this big kind of ocean. If you look at the background, too, you will see a little Titanic kind of treading along it. She probably would think that was a really stupid idea if I said that to her. But the other painting is Gorgons of the Crest, and if you know anything about mythology, that there were three Gorgon sisters, one of the most famous ones, Medusa, but also they weren't quite gods, but they weren't humans. They were somewhere between the superpower. And that my idea, my abstraction of Fran is a teacher, or Fran is a power in my head is being such a great teacher, but not actually her as the person, but that she was almost supernatural, that she had these great powers, and that she was actually much bigger than the big scary ocean. And then still life is biography and creation as a subject. So the painting on the left, reaching out, actually has a part of like Fran's reaching out, or the character's reaching out. And in there's a paint pad patty, which everybody kind of starts with, and it's actually making a Titanic iceberg painting with other landscapes, which reference how many paintings I have sitting around when I'm actually making work. I usually work on like 23 paintings at a time. And what I'll do is I'll set them out and I'll rotate them to keep them all fresh. So as soon as I get bored with one painting, I'll just cycle it inside out. So by the time it gets through 23 other things, it becomes new again when I see it. Now, I couldn't help but giggle and feel really dumb when I was doing so much stuff about the Titanic because I like the movie and I make Titanic movie jokes all the time. So has everybody in here at least seen the Titanic movie? Raise your hand if you've seen Titanic. So, okay, maybe this joke will make sense then. Okay, so in Titanic, you're part of one of two teams. You're either on the team that Jack also could have fit on the raft. How many of you guys think that Jack could have fit on the raft? Raise your hand. Or your team Rose and you think Jack was just in the water. How many of you guys think she did the right thing and she pushed Jack down in the frozen water? Nobody good, because if you raise your hand, he's going to walk out. So, it's a love story, and I realized I was doing this, so I wanted to make one painting that was just kind of like, making fun of myself here. So if you look at it, there's a Jack, that's a playing card that seems very natural in still life, and there's also a Rose. So we're talking about Jack and Rose there. And if you notice, there's a picture of the Titanic that's on the table, so you get it. And at the same time is when we had the submersible submarine thing that was going down to the Titanic crash, was actually happening right in the middle of this painting, which is not funny at all, but it was just coincidence. So one of the things that I like to do as a kid is if I had a can of soda or anything else, I always like to use and fold them up. So formally, I painted cans before, but it was odd that was kind of behind this stuff. But I also have a joker. So if you know the John Cougar Mellencamp song, A Little Ditty about Jack and Diane. How many people know that song? Little Ditty, Jack and Diane. So, but really, when you think about the movie The Titanic, if you're on Team Jack, it's all about Jack died. And Jack died because Rose didn't leave him, let him get on the raft. So this painting is called A Little Ditty about Jack Diane, which is a play in words because Jack died. And that's it. So that is my painting joke. Thanks, somebody left, somebody got the joke. You can make a joke in a painting, it's okay. I put the joker back there so you would know. Ha ha, it's not all serious. So, all right. One of the things that I started thinking about when I was dealing with all these motifs too is that how can I look at the same kind of narrative from multiple places at once? And so this is 2001, The Space Odyssey, and this is the end of the movie where the character goes through the kind of black hole, and he sees himself in different rooms as he leaves the rooms at different ages in life, and each time he looks at the next room, he's advanced so far in age. And so one of the things that I like in the idea of making some of these rooms is not the moment where you're in the room standing in it, but the moment where the door kind of opens and you're glancing in a place for the first time that's not familiar. Your expectation is of what should be here and what shouldn't. And if you look at the paintings in the wall in that little hotel room on the left, you will see they're filled with some of the beach scenes that I had in parts of the other still lifes. And also, too, hotel room 12th floor is actually a key to understanding a little bit about what the painting is about. So if you want to Google that, it's a very great poem by Marsh Poe. Jettison recovery is the idea of Fran looking through images and making stuff. As she's looking at the window, there's the character earlier with the boat riding the wave in. And on the table behind her is actually a painting of her done by some person, because I'm very aware I'm using Annie as a character to represent the idea of what Fran meant to me in my head, but painting a hypothetical narrative of all these different power structures she must have balanced. And so, and in the wall there's the one painting of the single room, because I'm very aware that time has moved past this. This is just a fun meeting to put in anything, but the idea of I as someone else, that is by the poet Arthur Rimbaud, talks about can the person who constructs their identity also use it, or is it separate? So as we're constructing the identity, can I then assume it, or is this something that's really given to us by somebody else? This also makes me think of a funny kind of picture trick that was used on the Pink Floyd album cover, which some people say Umaguma, but if you're in the South, usually you always call this album Umaguma, and it is a repetitious picture of the band members of Pink Floyd changing position in each time as the painting goes back in space. And this makes me think of how images are kind of tricky. They don't quite make sense all the time, and you can play all these games and made me think of the treachery of images. This is not applied by Renee Magritte. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is well, there's got to be paintings in this room. What would it be like to not be an outside viewer walking into the gallery, looking at things in the room, but what would it be like from the point of view of a character that's actually in the room? And so that's why this question, are we in the room or outside of the room? This first painting is called Keyhole Tsunami, which is using a little bit of the beach imagery and the door imagery, but this is actually on a wall, and it's when you're very aware that it's a painting, and there's actually a physical wall space behind it, and the door is always open, which is a very funny reference to Southern culture, because if you've ever heard two people yell at each other in Walmart, hey, how's your brother doing? Good? Y'all come on over, the door's always see the painting by the door is open, the door is open, the door is open, so the painting just repeats as it moves back in space. Now, part of it too is like sometimes in this, I factor into the waves things, that like the waves actually deal with like the power of the water and that the world is really big, and then sometimes, as you make art for a long time, you start to wonder, does any of this matter? Does anybody even care what I made? Do I have to go do this today? I mean, I love painting. For me, the great day is getting up, saying bye to my family, painting for 9 or 10 hours, coming home, hoping they're still there, that they have drinking about 5 Diet Cokes, watching the movie, and then doing it again the next day. That, for me, that's as good as it gets, and that sounds probably really lame, but I'm very happy with that. But sometimes, too, you wonder, is there really an audience for the stuff that you're doing? And so one of the things that I wanted to do was have myself actually taking this down and going through this body of work, because I'm not used to dealing with this kind of stuff in my work and converting it into imagery. So the first one is just called simply drowning. When I was taught how to swim, I was basically thrown in a swimming pool by an uncle and said, this is the best way to learn how to swim. And I have a very large head now, and I had a really large head as a kid, and I went right to the bottom and started drowning, which immediately gave me a fear of water for 2 years, you know. And he said, well, that's how you learn to swim. I was like, I think that's how you learn to drown, because I almost drowned. So, but I use it kind of as a metaphor for self-doubt. And the other painting, hypoxic washing, is the idea of like getting a little water in you, and that water kind of slowly taking your air away. And it's kind of like an idea, like Paige and I were talking earlier about, like, you know, having a good moment teaching. And some days you feel really good, and some days you leave the classroom, man, it just didn't click today. And like, you know, how even we as educators, when you've done this a long time, there is doubt that creeps in. And then, you know, dealing with the idea that once you get in your head, that idea can build, and sometimes it's just shallow water. It's not an ocean at all, and you have to move past it. And then kind of coming back full circle to the Titanic painting and looking at some of this and thinking, how cool would it be to see an image of the actual portholes on the outside of the boat, but looking from the inside out at the same time. So I put 2 images of waves and another part of the ship showing its inevitability, but from the idea of being inside the ship. Which gets me to a really funny side part where I'll talk about how sometimes you have to trust what you're making. Now, as I went down this rabbit hole, I had to understand that 5 paintings into this, I am drawing pictures of little orphan Andy talking to John Wesley paintings in rooms that were partly inspired by Alfred Hitchcock, Edward Hopper, and things that were on rental property sites in my town. And was this maybe the best way? I've always thought that you have to do just enough research to get into the image, right? If you're a picture maker, de Kooning said the hardest thing that a painter has to do is, what do you paint? What do you paint? Now compound that times, like, you know, I'm about to be 47. I've been painting since I was 17, so for 30 years, trying to come up with, where do you go next? Where do you go next? Well, where do you go next? Well, rather than thinking about what is the burden of where do I go next with an image, think more about kind of like, what is it you're looking for inside yourself when you're connecting these images? So I thought about what I was doing in grad school at the time that I fell in love with the idea of a friend as an educator and John Wesley as a painter. And one thing I would do between Fran's class and my printmaking class, which was taught by this great guy, Dennis Olson, is I would go home and eat lunch for an hour and a half, and they would run 2 episodes of Dawson's Creek. Now, I'm a TV junkie, and I especially love family teen dramas that go on, where like they start in high school and they go to college, and there's always a great dad figure. My dad left when we were early. He was in and out of my life. I had a great stepfather, but I loved the idea of idealized TV dads. And for me, Mitch Leary, Dawson and Steph from Dawson's Creek, if you ever watch that, was the perfect kind of dad. Dawson was a filmmaker. He was very encouraging in that. He was very funny. He himself was very creative and all kinds of stuff. It was a good fit. Now, in season 5, episode 3, Mitch is driving down the road, and Dawson comes back from film school, and he tells his dad that he's quit being an artist, he's quit being a filmmaker, and he dies in a car. And I was like, man, this is terrible. And then the next episode was the whole kind of funeral thing where they've got bury Mitch, and somebody calls the house, and the answering machine goes off, and Dawson has to answer it, and it's just terrible because it's his dad's voice on the answering machine. And as he's going through the couple of days where we're dealing with the funeral, he keeps having scenes where he sees his dad, and he remembers things about him by being in the place. This always stuck with me because this is very similar to what I was thinking when I was making this stuff. And I thought about like how I grew up, and like how we were in the same house, and like how my sister was my best friend and still is, and how my mom was pretty great for being a single mom of 20, and how like it was kind of us 3 for a while until it wasn't. And how we had all this together. And then too, like, you know, how like I spend a lot of time watching TV. And this is one of the things that's in the show. And people in the back room, there's a little TV, there's a little single house up on the hill, which is very similar to the house. And there's a tidal wave coming on the outside of the drum. And then, like, when I first started teaching, when I moved back here, in a very similar way, I would lose my mom in a car wreck 2 months into teaching. And then the whole process that I had to deal with going through funeral stuff, everything happened just like it did in that TV show. That my mom's answering machine would go off, and then I would spend months in the house afterwards, walking around the corner and seeing her, remembering things that I hadn't thought about since I was a little kid. And then the picture on the right there is my grandmother with her, that 2 years after that, she would pass, and that she was the person that gave me my first set of paints, and that she encouraged me to be an artist, and we would watch Bob Ross together, and that was our thing. And she also smoked cigarettes and drank beer. It was really funny, and I like that about her too, because she was real smart. And then she also had a clothesline in her backyard. She would always have really, really weird socks, and she didn't believe in throwing socks away either. My wife sometimes will pick up my socks that are more like a sculpture, and she's like, "You have to throw this away. What's wrong with you?" And I always think about my grandma's like, "Grandma just put them on a clothesline." It kind of worked itself out. But how that was also connected to all these other things that I was thinking about too with Miss Ruby, and I put the lamp there at the table, and it ended up somehow that we actually become these tables, and we hold all this stuff with us, and it carries with us. So I was thinking, well, how do you make a picture when you're thinking about all this, and as you get older, how you carry all this? And how I'm just kind of like, you have to move on to new spaces. Like, this is a picture of my wife and my son. And then I get to kind of like be the Mitch Beer for him, and then I get to encourage him, you know, that he wants to be a YouTube star some days, and some days he just wants to play Roblox, and then sometimes we do Pokemon together. And this is weird that I connected all this to this TV show until I remembered one fact that became really strange when I was looking at how I was connected to the painting, is that the actor that played Mitch Leary's name was John Wesley Shipp, who is the painter that I'm talking about, and the Shipp was the painting I was looking at. So, it is a very strange connection. So, the end part of this was something that I thought about when I wanted to initially start this body of work, as I was thinking about the Beach Boys song In My Room, and the Charles Bukowski poem, Alone with Everyone, where he goes through all these things that he does. He says the flesh covers, they put the mind there, sometimes the soul, the women break faces, the men drink too much, and nobody finds one, they keep looking, and it goes on and on. And at the end he says, we're all trapped by a singular fate. Nobody ever finds the one. The city dumps fill, the junkyards fill, the madhouses fill, the hospitals fill, the graveyard fill. Nothing else fills. And this is the vision of a guy trying to find himself out of the despair that comes with all the totality of this stuff. But that also Nietzsche warned that he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. That if you gaze into the abyss will also gaze into thee. And so one of the things what I'm still making and creating with all this doubt and the losses that we all share in coming together, and the people that matter to us, is that while we're here, the lights still turn on, the stairs should still be climbed. There's one last porthole with light, and the crest of the wave pushes us forward. And that's it. Thank you. It's a good question. Anyone else? Yes.
With a couple of your pieces, I noticed in some of them the doorknob is in such like a striking part of the painting. It kind of scared at me almost.
Mm-hmm.
Was there like a specific impression or reason that you wanted with that?
I want the viewer to feel like they're walking into it. Alright? If you're 10 foot from a door, you still have time to change your mind. At that distance, like if we went up to, because there's one really good slide on this too. If you go up to it, there's no choice. Like if you're that close, right? You've committed to some reason, you're going in or out. But the thing is, the way the doors are thinking, they're really not any different. They're not at angles or they're not in the aggregate, but you can kind of see both the obstruction and the other side. Which is, I think, too, if metaphysically, if you're thinking about both of these things, what are known and unknown, and what you've experienced and what you remember. I mean, the funny thing about dealing with loss is the older you get, you will start to abstract loss. The longer you live, people that matter that are gone, you will start to abstract their ideas, right? The idea of what I talk about in here with using kind of Fran as a character, I didn't have a huge personal relationship with Fran. To me, She was a critic, she was a teacher, and in my mind, I always wanted to be as critical about my work as she was about the art world and the paintings she made. And for me, it was kind of like the teacher part of like what was left of her in my mind. As a person, and this is really kind of cool, we didn't correspond that much when I got out of grad school. What I would do is every 2 or 3 years, when I was actually teaching, I would send her an email and I would apologize for being a crappy student. And I would say, I am now a teacher and I promise you I'm getting it back tenfold. And every time I let you down, I'm getting every part of that back. And she would always send a very kind email back, Jason, that's just part of it. Glad you're doing good. See, you're doing a lot of shows. Right? And I didn't ever want to ask her because she was a very busy person. She had a lot of careers that she was in charge of. And she really at the end wanted to do scholarship. But during COVID, I'd send her a thing and I just said, hey, I would love for you to look at some of these paintings and just tell me what you think if you have time. And she didn't respond. Until a year later, I just get this email, hey, I saw this email. I've been going through it. And what had happened is, Fran's partner, Dottie, who she'd been with was the love of her life, had passed and she was going through all that and some health stuff of her own. And she just simply hadn't had a chance to get back to me. And when she did, we were just talking. And it's so funny because the idea of what I had as friends, a person in the art world, versus the person who had just lost the person they loved the most and was sharing with me this very personal thing, this was the most personal we had kind of ever been with each other. And I said, man, it's terrible, because I knew Dottie was like, I loved Dottie. You know, he was great. They would have parties. Dottie was like the best host. They listened to Rolling Stones records. They were 60s California cool. Like, they were, you wanted to be there. They were that cool. And, like, it was really personal and, like, honest and, like, kind of sad and beautiful all at once. And, you know, and it was shortly after that we would send a couple, like, funny emails talking about stories. And she was like, how do you remember all this? Like, man, these were the times, you know. And for her, they were just another time. But the doorknobs are kind of like a possibility there. I think I went into the story to answer your question, but I think too, like when you see a painting like that and the knob's almost like actually the scale of a doorknob too, it enhances the fact that you might react with it, right? It's where like a small one, like the painting on right, your door's always open. You've already seen the other side, you can kind of at distance, but in Keyhole Tsunami, that door handle is about the size of a real doorknob. So when you walk up to it, you're tempted, but then you're looking at it like it's not a real door, it's an illusion. Good question. The reason why I bet when you saw like a slide that had Dawson's Creek, you're like, where is this going? I thought we were at the end. You're like, I think sometimes it's okay to be really idiosyncratic about yourself. The most important thing that you all have as an artist right now, are you an artist, young lady? The most important thing that will be the assets, there's two things you really need to understand that are important. One is, if I haven't stressed this enough, is your teachers. Right? You have great teachers here. I know most of them. They're great. They're very invested in who you are. They're invested in your work. Believe it or not, they only want you to do well. You are part of the lineage of who they learn from. Like, I have a big group of my students over here, and I push the crap out of them every day, and I get on their nerves, and I hop around, and I drink a lot of Diet Coke, and I ask for more. And I know, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I see a lot of the comedians, all of them. But we really want them, I want them to do well. I'm so excited about going to bellwethers and watching union students that are here today and watching our UTM students do well. And for them, a lot of them, this has been a journey to get there. And you all have different backgrounds and different stories of your own. But trust that your teachers are trying to guide you, because we just want to make it easier for you than it was for us. Because as we get older, we learn things, and we're just trying to speed it up. I mean, that'd be the one thing I would say is, like an undergraduate, I wish I would have been a better student because I could have got to some things quicker. And as a professional, I could have got to some places faster. My mom could have seen more of that picture. It's a big regret of mine. But the other thing is, your life experiences that you don't value at all right now, because you're all looking at a bunch of art, you're looking at all these things through our history, you're doing all this stuff, and you think, man, I want to be like them. I want to be that good. And you learn everything about these artists. But in the meantime, there's things that you're experiencing that are going to be the true fuel for the original stuff that you're going to make. You just don't value it yet. Learn to put currency in that. Learn to look at it objectively on the outside. And learn how to turn it into creativity. Now, you can't always stay there, because if you only work within yourself, you'll start to repeat yourself. But value your experiences.
your place, your time. You guys are living and making right now. It is a very weird, modern, virtual, kind of sometimes sad, kind of sometimes goofy time right now. 2024 is weird. And you're artists. I would just say strangle all that weirdness and take it with you, because you are 20 or how old are you? You are 22 right now. Do you know how fun 22 is? You will be 22 once and then it'll be gone like that. And you will see the world different as you get older, because the world will let you dream less. Like right now when you're an art student, this is everybody's an art student room. When you're basically 18 to 22 or 3, all anybody wants you to do as an art student is to come to class and create, and to create more. So one time in your life where like everybody's supporting you doing it, right? And then when you get out, guess what? It's like a vacuum. It's like, and you have bills, and you have responsibilities, and you have doubt, and people say, well, how do you got this art degree? You know what? And you better be like, I'll show you what. Because if you don't, you'll get swallowed up really quick and it'll be gone. So right now, think about these parts of you that are unique to you. That's your story, that's only you can tell that story, and use that as part of what you use to create. I think it's really important. Good question. What's another one? Right there. Oh, sorry, I'll get to you next. I'm sorry.
Was painting the things that you think about and the stuff that you went through, was it like relieving and helpful, processing everything on the canvas?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was talking with somebody about one of these paintings the other day. I was like, well, this is like catharsis. I'm not processing loss. Exactly. What I'm trying to do is make present is like, look, people can be out of your life when they pass away. But also, too, if they meant anything to you, they're always right there with you, right? I mean, you would say that. Like, I can say right now that I've thought about this week, everybody that passed away that I talked about, I've thought about it multiple times. But even when I've been making paintings for the last 15 or 20 years, every time I'm doing a painting, there's at least once where I think about, Fran wouldn't like that edge. What would Fran say? I mean, you know, that's just a good teacher. But I'd also think about, like, what's John Wesley going to make next? He's not my favorite painter, but the Night Titanic for me is such an important picture because of its perfection and duality between minimalism and recognizable subject matter. And so when I'm painting my own experience, it's tough because it's harder when you have to talk about it than when you do it. The reason why I make paintings is I'm trying to express something that normally I can't articulate in a conversation, or I can't write down in a book. It's the reason why I'm a painter and not a writer, or a poet, or a singer, right? I mean, I'm trying to make a picture that decodes the plurality of all these things happening in one still little stupid square, which is beautiful because that's the best part about painting. It's so, usually for the most part, it's so square, it's so simple, it's so historically like, it hasn't changed much since Rembrandt to now. I'm still just pushing around pigment and dirt, right, in some kind of order that makes you like think or see something. But I'm always keeping those things with me. So when I say I'm alone, you know, in my room, along with everybody, right, the alone part or in my room part is really about my creative space. When I sit down and make a painting, I'm usually by myself. I don't paint a lot around other people. I mean, a couple of people occasionally. I have some students working, like I've had people that I've mentored, but usually I don't like to be around other people that much. But when I'm in there, I'm usually thinking about everybody that's important in my life and the reaction or non-reaction to something I'm making. And that's just kind of what cycles in my mind. It's not a singular thing. It's not like, you know, if we're all going to leave this building and go to Casey's, you take this highway, you get right there. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking of the airspace. I'm thinking about like all this stuff. And see, that's why I make a painting. I'm not doing a good job articulating, but all this stuff just kind of sits on top. So what I'm trying to do is paint all the stuff that's sitting on top because it's happening at the same time I'm trying to make a singular narrative. So could that stuff actually coexist? Or as I was talking to Dr. Carls earlier, we had this great conversation at the door. She was like, some things look like they didn't belong at all, that they could be peeled off. And I said, yeah, because they don't exist in lineal space. I'm taking them from different ways. She was like, yeah, and she actually said that. I was like, yeah, but that's so hard to convey in this little picture. It's easy to do like in a movie with special effects, hard to do in a painting. So I think you do have to be close. Anything you talk about in a work of art, you have to be prepared to do this if it's any good, right? Because hopefully you're not making anything that you think is going to be bad. So at some point, if it's good, you're going to have to go talk about it in front of people. And if it's really close, like let me tell you something, this week has been close. Like some of this stuff for me is really hard to like visit and go through this and talk about it. But also too, in a room full of young artists, I'm trying to tell you, like, unfortunately, all of you guys will go through this. And it can either destroy you or you can understand it. It's just a part of who you are as a person in your journey. And that can sit on top of all the other things that you're trying to do as an artist, and you can use it, and it can be a part of your creativity, and you can have a chance to share it and not let it completely consume you, like not make you work. Does that make sense?